Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. But first we move to Somalia, where the country's president, Shekh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, is trying to get international support for his fragile transitional government. The president has now been in power, if that's the right word, for just over a year, and arguably has one of the most difficult and dangerous jobs in the world. He warned this week that terrorism and piracy in Somalia threaten death and destruction far beyond its borders. Well, I met him in London and I wanted to know what he was thinking about there, which countries he would think would be most affected by the internal chaos in his country.
It
has already reached beyond our borders. Pirates hijack ships from distant places. Terrorists have also reached many areas such as Yemen. You're also aware that terrorists became able to repatriate many people who live in Europe and America to Somalia and trained them. Therefore, it's possible that these trained terrorists may be sent back to where they came from.
And in terms of the Somali government, you are waging, obviously, a war, really, with Al-Shabaab, and Al-Shabaab recently pledged its support to Al-Qaeda. Do you see them as now as one and the same thing, or still separate?
They are one and the same. It's apparent from their statements. Their leaders are members of the main Al-Qaeda organization. All of their leaders came from Afghanistan, where they were trained and participated in fighting alongside Al-Qaeda. There are high-ranking Al-Qaeda officials and soldiers who came from abroad who are currently fighting inside Somalia.
How big a force is, in fact, Al-Qaeda? Do you know how many actual sort of Al-Qaeda people, militants, are there in your country now, in Somalia? How many from Al-Qaeda?
Let us divide them into two, the internal Al-Qaeda and those who came from abroad. The numbers of internal Al-Qaeda is unlimited, because their training is continuous. As for those who came from overseas, the estimate is between 800 and 1,200 people.
Now, there is talk at the moment about the fact that you are going to organize a major offensive to try and drive Al-Shabaab out of Mogadishu. How much help do you think you can get from the United States in this? Would you welcome the United States doing airstrikes on your behalf?
The government has a responsibility to restore peace, law and order. Our forces are able to achieve that. However, we welcome any help that comes from the international community, be it the United States or elsewhere.
Would you also welcome American troops on the land, on the ground in Somalia too? American forces?
I believe that government troops are sufficient to do the job.
And Al-Shabaab spokesman speaking on Al Jazeera said that when told about the possibility of Americans getting involved in airstrikes, maybe being involved on the ground and so on, this was what the guy from Al-Shabaab said. He said, if they come to Somalia, they need to know that those that fought them in 1993 and dragged their bodies in the streets of Mogadishu are still present and ready to drag their bodies again. Do you think they're that strong that they could do that, the Al-Shabaab rebels?
Not at all. Al-Shabaab are despised by the Somali public. They've caused many problems for civilians. The Somali people are today thinking of peace and statehood, and they'll support anyone who works towards that goal.
And what do you think about the situation now? How do you view Ethiopia, a country that ousted you from government, had come in as theoretically as friends. Do you think today of the country of Ethiopia as a friend, an enemy, or half and half?
Ethiopia is our neighbour, and we have no choice but to live together side by side. It's better to live together in peace rather than in conflict. That is our choice. Situations may change, but I can say that in the current situation, I see them as a friend.
As a friend. We saw in the newspapers and so on television that France had captured 35 pirates over the weekend. Do you think this is a sign that the rest of the world is getting more involved in helping you? Is this a promising change?
Very much so, because the pirates are causing problems for the Somali people, the government and the world at large, and a united front against them is something important which we welcome.
What about the fact that there are now, Mr. President, they say more than 130 people who are being held hostage by pirates off the coast or in Somalia? 130, including, of course, the British couple, Paul and Rachel Chandler. Is there any news of them, for instance?
First of all, we're very sad about these deplorable acts perpetrated against innocent people, such as the British couple who are elderly people. The Somali government and the Somali people are very sorry about their abduction, and tremendous efforts have been made to secure their release. These efforts continue, and we know that they are in good health. We're very hopeful that they will regain their freedom.
Of course, the situation for you is, in terms of security and so on, as President of Somalia, in terms of security is very difficult, isn't it? Because 4 government ministers, I think, have been murdered and so on. Do you expect there to be attempts on your life too?
Attempts against my life are a regular occurrence. There have been 5 murdered ministers, not 4. All were very important and active ministers. The Somali government and people are determined to ensure that their blood was not spilt in vain, and that their sacrifice will help in bringing peace and stability to Somalia, and also free the country from these terrorist groups.
Would you say that you have the hope that before you leave office you can safely walk through the streets of Mogadishu, just walking everywhere? Do you think the day when you can do that will ever dawn?
Very much so, because you're aware about the problems that used to happen in Somalia and the changes which took place in 2006. No one expected that Mogadishu could be pacified. Today, at a time when the Somali people are more aware and the Somali government is trying hard to secure peace and the international community is supportive, I believe that we can succeed.
You have one of the most difficult jobs in the world, and naturally we wish you well. Coming up in a moment, NATO's new man in Afghanistan and Helen Clark, until recently the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and now with an even bigger job.